Indictment for murder, SC code 16-3-0010, CDR code 0116. Verdict, guilty.
Alec Murdaugh has been found guilty for the murder of his wife and son, capping off a dramatic downfall for the former South Carolina attorney. For more on this, I want to bring in Avery Wilkes, chief investigative reporter at the Post and Courier. He has been covering this from the beginning. Also joining us from South Carolina, criminal defense attorney Chris Adams. Avery, I just said it. You have followed this trial since day one. Were you surprised how this ended, how quickly the jury came to a verdict?
You know, it was kind of surprising. I think we were trying to be prepared for all outcomes. You know, we were still in the process of pre-writing stories and, you know, settling in for the day. I was planning to go and grab dinner at one of the fine local establishments here in Walterboro. And then, you know, suddenly people just started sprinting in every direction and there was movement in the courtroom. And I realized, you know, this is actually happening. So, you know, I think we prepared for every eventuality, but it was a little bit shocking that the jury, after 6 weeks of trial, came to a verdict in less than 3 hours.
You have been embedded in this community for weeks. People who know the Murdaugh family, how are they reacting to this?
You know, I think everybody has a different reaction to this. You know, there have been people who don't like the fact that their community is tied to this, you know, is carrying this stigma of being associated with the Murdaugh name. There's also people who are embracing it. You know, we've had food trucks out here outside the media center who have been really great to us the whole time. So there's been a whole range of reactions. I can't say there's any one uniform, you know, take to this, but and we've talked to a lot of people, you know, when we go out to eat after covering all day of trial, or when we see people around and ask them, you know, what do you think about this? And a lot of people think that he's guilty, but, you know, a lot of people think that there's a lot more to this story that we still don't know in terms of why he might have done this.
Avery, anybody surprised tonight? Anybody else surprised that he had basically no reaction in the courtroom? None.
You know, he's not someone who necessarily reacts to traumatic events the way that the rest of us might, you know, and that's been a theme throughout the trial. But I was surprised at the lack of emotion. You know, he has cried a lot. He's broken down. He's become very red in the face and very emotional throughout this trial. So I was surprised that we didn't see any of that when the verdicts were read. But it's also possible that, you know, he's a lawyer. He's handled a lot of trials himself, and he probably knew what it meant when the jury, you know, came back with its verdict in less than 3 hours, and he likely knew that that was not a good thing for him.
He may be in a state of shock. Chris, let's get legal. Ever since Murdaugh himself took the stand, then the judge granted the jury access to the crime scene, there was more and more buzz that this would likely be a hung jury or maybe not even guilty. Were you surprised tonight?
I was, unlike Avery, I was shocked at the speed of the verdict. You know, the jurors, who knows what the jurors are going to do? They're going to do what they do. They're there the whole time. They're paying attention. They're going to do the best. In my experience, they're going to do the best they can with the material that they receive. But usually with a long trial, there's a long deliberation. There's a lot of material for them to sort through. There's disagreements. I think the speed of this verdict indicates there weren't disagreements, or there weren't disagreements over anything significant back in the jury room.
Then do you think putting him on the stand was a big mistake? Or was it a Hail Mary pass worth it either way? There was just too much evidence against him.
Well, there was a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence, and there was no direct evidence. I counsel all the time my clients of whether or not I believe they should testify, but it's their right. Constitutionally, it's the client's right to testify or the client's right to not testify. And there are some clients who have gone to take that witness stand that I'm diving at the ground trying to grab them to talk to them a little bit more to make sure of this decision. And then there are others that I'm kind of shoving up to the witness stand against their will. Ultimately, Alex Murdaugh's an experienced lawyer. and I suspect that this was his decision. It may be in keeping with what his attorney's advice was, and it may not be.
Explain South Carolina to
it's courage. It was a lot of courage to get up there with all these financial crimes and know you were going to get just drugged through 99 financial crimes and the betrayal of everyone close to you through financial misdeeds. That would not be fun for anyone to sit through.
You think that's courageous or delusional and desperate?
Maybe all of the above. I know when defendants don't testify, Stephanie, people will say they were cowards. They wouldn't even take the witness stand. And so I think if and I have to have those conversations, if somebody does choose to testify, knowing that it's going to be a tough experience, but they want to tell their story to the jurors, I want to give them some credit for courage, not delusion.
I'm gonna let you give him that credit. I'm gonna reserve judgment on that one.
Occupational hazard.
Explain South Carolina to us for mere mortals like me sitting in New York. Sentencing tomorrow at 9:30 sounds laser beam fast.
I tell you, the other lawyers that I saw on the courthouse yard tonight couldn't believe the sentencing didn't happen tonight, which is what usually happens in South Carolina state courts. The sentencings occur most of the time right after the verdict comes in, if the verdict is in favor of the prosecution. They will need to notify all the victims. They probably have been in contact with them and told them that they would have some time to show up. So I think they would be making those calls. The victim witness people would make those calls tonight so that everyone would have the opportunity to come. And I guess they'll be coming in the morning. So it's very different than other states. It's very different than federal court. And this sentencing hearing, this matter will be concluded sometime tomorrow.
Traveling at the speed of light. Tomorrow, Avery Wilks will be back at the courtroom covering this story. Avery, Chris, thank you both for being here tonight. When we